The knife was already in my hand when my granddaughter leaned in and whispered those words. The frosting had just begun to crack beneath the pressure of the blade, right where I'd overdone the rosettes trying to make them look fuller. I stopped, not because of the cake, but because of her voice. She didn't stutter. She didn't plead. Her words landed flat, like a smooth stone skimming the surface of still water. That afternoon, the whole house smelled like warm vanilla and hydrangeas. Harper, my daughter, had brought in mason jars filled with blue and white flowers tied with twine. Aesthetic, she said. I let her say it. The kitchen buzzed with that kind of soft, strained hum people make when they're pretending everything's fine. Julian was pouring sparkling cider into vintage glasses he'd carted in like props for a magazine shoot. Harper stood in front of the window, perfectly lit like she always knew how to find the light. She wore cream linen, barefoot, her hair pinned up like she'd just finished meditating. And there I was, by the island, knife still in hand, and Maya, my granddaughter, looking straight through me. Something shifted, not in the room exactly, but inside me. My spine remembered the years I'd spent on my feet. My knees ached like they always did when I'd stood too long for someone else's comfort. My hands stilled. Maya took one step closer, like she might repeat herself, but she didn't need to. I heard her the first time, and I knew this wasn't about drama. Not about forgotten place cards or being left off an invitation list. This was bigger. I forced a smile and pushed the blade all the way through the cake. Lemon poppy seed with lavender glaze, Harper's favorite, not mine. Funny how I was the one baking it. The guests clapped. Someone from Harper's wellness brand raised their phone to record. Julian leaned into the shot, arm around Harper's waist, looking like they were launching a lifestyle product. Maya's eyes never left me. I handed her a plate. She didn't take it. That's when it hit me this birthday was never about me. It never had been. And let me make something clear, this isn't one of those stories where everything falls apart all at once. No, it started here, with a cake I didn't ask to bake, in a kitchen filled with flowers that weren't for me, and a whisper from a girl who still believed I was worth warning. Once the cake was sliced and the camera flashes dimmed, I noticed Maya standing near the pantry door. She wasn't smiling. She didn't blink. Her phone was in her hand, low and quiet, her thumb hovering just above the screen like she was still deciding whether to hit play. She didn't need to. I already knew something had broken open, something that couldn't be tucked back in. Julian's laughter echoed from the living room, too loud, like someone trying to convince the room he belonged. He swirled his drink like it was part of a scene. Harper had slipped down the hallway with her laptop, probably squeezing in a quick call to her team. That's what this house had become, content. Every piece of it, every memory embedded in these walls, repurposed for someone else's story. Maya didn't speak. She just slipped the phone into my hand. I tapped the screen, static at first. Then Julian's voice, too casual, the kind of casual that only shows up when someone feels untouchable. She's almost there, he said. One more slip. One more time she forgets the stove or repeats herself in public, and the doctor signs off. Harper chimed in next, cold, precise. I've already drafted the statement. We just need her out before the new product launch. Any delay looks sloppy. Maya didn't react. I forgot to breathe. I handed the phone back and stared at the bowl of lemons on the counter. For one wild second, I thought about hurling one against the tile just to hear something break. Instead, I picked up a dish towel and began wiping a counter that was already spotless. They want me gone, I said. Not to Maya, not to anyone, just out loud, to the air, to the truth. They need your image, Maya said softly, but not your voice. I stood there, towel in hand, and thought of every time I'd made room for Harper. When she froze on stage at her first recital, when she begged to switch schools because she didn't fit in, when her heart got broken for the first time and she asked to come home. And she did. She came home. And little by little, she made it hers. The mason jars, the gauzy curtains, the abstract wall art that meant nothing but took up space. None of it was mine. I hadn't chosen a single piece. But I'd let it happen, because that's what you do when you love someone. You let things happen until, one day, you look around and realize nothing around you belongs to you anymore. Maya stepped in closer. There's more, she said. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. Inside were printed emails, insurance forms, even a scheduled in-home assessment from a doctor I'd never met. They were getting ready to declare me incompetent, to take over everything I had built. I didn't say a word, just folded the towel, laid it by the sink, and turned to the window. The garden I used to tend had changed. The rosemary bush had gone wild. The basil was gone. Something else had taken root and it wasn't mine. I didn't go upstairs that night. I stayed in the kitchen long after the candles had burned out. After Julian packed away his gear. After Harper retreated to the guest room she no longer asked to stay in, I remained by the stove, in the same spot, staring at the grout between the tiles I'd scrubbed more times than I could count. The house was quiet, but not still. The pipes let out the occasional sigh. The old oak out back creaked every so often like it, too, was trying to speak. A single car rolled by, slow tires crunching gravel. I counted each sound, like a metronome to keep my thoughts from unraveling. But the thoughts came anyway. There was a time when Harper would have flour on her nose every Saturday morning. She'd lean against the counter, arms folded, ponytail swinging, asking about why dough rises or why lemon zest work better than juice in some recipes. I never had all the answers, but I let her think I did. Back then, the stove was gas and temperamental. Sometimes it took too long to light. She hated the sound it made terrified her. So I'd light it before she came in, even if I had to strike the match twice. I used to joke that I was braver than any fireman, and she'd laugh, really laugh loud, and full and from the chest. That laugh disappeared with time. I hadn't heard it in years. And now, I stood at the same stove, thinking about that lemon poppy seed cake, how she'd requested it, how she smiled when I brought it out, how she thanked me like I was just some guest baker brought in for the day, not the woman who taught her what a measuring cup was. The cabinets belonged to her now. She'd replaced the knobs, swapped my ceramic canisters for glass jars with handwritten labels, repainted the backsplash without even asking. Julian said it looked cleaner, more modern. I said nothing. I opened the drawer beneath the stove, the one where I used to tuck away birthday cards, scribbled notes Harper made when she was young. Most were gone, likely tossed during one of her organizing fits. But one was still there, folded twice, yellow at the corners, a heart drawn in red crayon. Inside, it said for Mom, "You make everything better." I placed it back exactly where I found it, closed the drawer slowly. The silence in that kitchen didn't comfort me anymore. It confirmed what I already knew. The warmth that once filled this space wasn't mine. I had been generous with space, with forgiveness, with trust. Too generous. Now the walls that once echoed with laughter only held the blueprint of someone else's plan. When Maya came downstairs the next morning, she found me already at the table. I hadn't slept. I didn't want to. Sleep wasn't safe anymore. Waking up meant stepping back into a house that no longer recognized me. A life where my own daughter had rewritten the script and cast me as the problem to be removed. The stove clicked once, a faint tick like a memory. I didn't move, just watched, waiting to see if the flame would catch. The folder Maya had handed me wasn't thick, maybe a dozen pages. But as I sat at the breakfast table flipping through them, it felt heavier than any cookbook I'd ever written. These weren't accusations, they were arrangements. Clean, quiet, pre-approved. 3 papers stood out. The first a form granting Harper limited access to my digital accounts. It had my signature, or something that looked close enough to pass. The second a letter of intent, saying I was considering transferring ownership of my cooking studio to a newly registered LLC. A business Harper had set up 2 months prior. The third an insurance policy I'd never heard of, listing Julian as the primary beneficiary if I were to die. The payout was too high for a plan I had no memory of signing. I sat there for a long time, saying nothing. Maya didn't press. She sat across from me, eating toast without butter, eyes on the window. She looked like someone who had already made peace with what I was just beginning to understand. The kitchen felt smaller somehow. The chairs were too hard. The air felt overly clean, like it had already adjusted to a version of me that was gone. I opened a drawer I rarely touched. It was the one Harper used for her tools when she cooked here. Every knife inside was brand new, sleek, black-handled, untouched. Mine were packed away somewhere in the garage. I reached out, touched the tip of one blade just enough to feel how sharp it was. Then I shut the drawer and locked it. I'd installed that lock myself 5 years ago when Harper first started hosting her events here. I told her it was for safety, but really, I needed one drawer that was just mine. Only 2 keys existed. One on my ring, the other I'd given her for emergencies. I checked my keychain. Mine was still there. That night, after Harper came back from her yoga class, she dropped her bag on the counter like she owned the place. She pulled a green bottle of pressed juice from the fridge, didn't say a word, and wandered upstairs. I waited until I heard the bedroom door click shut. Then I checked the drawer. It was unlocked. The lock wasn't damaged. It had been opened with a key. The second key. I didn't sleep. I sat in my armchair, hands folded, the folder still resting on my lap. Sometime around 2 in the morning, I went out to the garage. Found the box that held my old knives, the ones with dull wooden handles and a touch of rust along the edges. I brought them back in and laid them on the counter, side by side like old friends returning from exile. Then I relocked the drawer, and this time I kept both keys. I wasn't ready to say anything, not yet. But something inside me had shifted. This wasn't just about money. It wasn't even about betrayal. It was about space, about the silent dismantling of a life, one drawer, one password, one piece of paper at a time. Until there's nothing left of you in the home you built. Wednesday morning, Harper made an announcement. She wanted to shoot a new episode for her wellness series. Said it would be a spontaneous mother-daughter feature. Her followers, she said, loved authenticity. Julian arrived 20 minutes later, camera gear packed in his soft-sided branded cases. He kissed my cheek and called me radiant. I nodded, didn't smile. The kitchen had already been rearranged before I'd even had my coffee. Harper had replaced the aprons hanging on the wall. The new ones had their logo stitched across the front. Julian walked the room adjusting light angles, muttering about shadows and mood. He asked me to stand on the left side of the counter where the lighting was best. I stood where I always did, centered. Maya helped me with the prep. She didn't say much, but she saw everything. When I handed her the flour, she slipped a tiny black camera from her pocket and nestled it between the cookbook stand and spice rack. It was barely the size of a matchbox. No blinking light, no lens visible. She set a ceramic spoon rest in front of it and stepped away. Harper took center screen, all smiles and warmth. Introduced us like I was a guest chef on her platform. Her hand brushed against mine as she reached for the whisk. It didn't feel tender. It felt like a cue. Julian gave her a thumbs up from behind the lens. We made almond scones with lavender glaze. My recipe, Harper called it an inspired fusion. I didn't correct her. Her followers wouldn't care either way. About halfway through, Harper leaned toward the camera and thanked everyone for tuning in. She spoke of legacy, of generational wisdom, of the beauty of learning from a parent. Her tone was thick as syrup. I could barely stomach it. Behind the camera, Julian mouthed lines like they'd rehearsed them a dozen times. When the filming stopped, the room exhaled. Harper wiped her hands. Julian handed her a drink. Asked how she felt it went. She said it felt flat, that I wasn't giving enough energy. Then she turned to me and smiled just with her mouth. Suggested we might film another version later in the week. Maybe something warmer, more expressive. Maybe I could wear a brighter apron, speak a little faster. Just a suggestion. I looked over at Maya. Her face didn't change, but she gave a small nod, barely there, but firm. Later that evening, back in the quiet of her room, Maya showed me what the hidden camera had captured. It recorded everything, not just the segment. But what happened after? The way Harper spoke when she thought I wasn't listening. The way Julian referred to me not as family, not as a partner, but as the brand's nostalgic anchor. His words, not mine. They weren't building a legacy. They were building a product, and I was the packaging. I didn't cry, didn't yell. I just sat on the edge of the bed and watched it again. Watched Harper's smile falter ever so slightly when she turned away. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't angry. It was indifferent. And somehow, that cut deeper. That Friday, Maya skipped her morning lecture. She sat at the dining table with a yellow notepad and her laptop open. 3 browser windows lined the screen. I recognized one as a legal resource. Another looked like a digital news archive. The third showed the profile of a woman in uniform. Maya tapped her name with her finger. Detective Noel Avery. Financial Crimes and Elder Protection Unit. Savannah Branch. Quiet reputation. Hard to reach. But Maya had found her. She'd handled a case where a son forged documents to take control of his mother's estate. The result had been rare and public. The son lost everything. The mother reclaimed her name. Maya had already sent a message. I stood in the doorway, hands in my pockets, just listening to the sound of keys tapping and the fridge humming low behind her. She looked up at me. There's a pattern to what they're doing, she said. It's not just you. She explained it clearly. Harper and Julian had been using my image to build value. Emotional branding, aimed at women missing their mothers. The words landed with weight, not heavy but final. I turned, and walked to the kitchen, switched on the kettle. Chamomile filled the air. I opened the pantry. The jars were still labeled in Harper's script, but tucked way in the back, beneath a shelf, I found an old recipe card. My handwriting, faded but familiar. Lemon cornbread with honey thyme butter, a recipe I hadn't touched in years. I laid it on the counter, just to see it again. Around noon, Harper returned. She wore an oversized ivory sweater, expensive shoes, hair in a loose braid. She breezed into the kitchen like it had been made for her. She said the room felt stale. Maybe we should repaint before the next shoot. Julian would make the call. I didn't respond. She glanced at the counter, noticed the recipe card. Her mouth curved slightly. Not a smile. Something else. That one's old, she said. Doesn't really fit the brand anymore. Then she turned and headed upstairs. I stared at that recipe for a long time. Then I slid it into my apron pocket. That afternoon, Maya made another call. This time, Detective Avery picked up. They didn't speak long, quiet sentences, no wasted words. Maya jotted notes while I sat beside her, watching the ink form shapes that meant change, dates, document numbers, a contact at the insurance board. We were building something, carefully, quietly, like a pot left to simmer low and steady. By the evening, I felt tired not from chores, but from holding it all in. Before bed, I wrote a list, not of people to confront, of recipes. The ones Harper had wiped from the site, the ones I used to make when the house echoed with real laughter, not applause on cue. I folded the paper and slid it beneath my pillow. Sometimes, you don't fight fire with fire. You let them strike the match, and then you wait. Because every role comes with a script, and sometimes the script breaks. And when it does, the truth walks in quiet, uninvited, and undeniable. Sunday morning, I pulled out the cast iron skillet. It hadn't been used in years. Its handle worn smooth, a tiny fracture along the edge. It belonged to my mother. I scrubbed it down, oiled it gently, and let it heat in the oven. That skillet had fed generations. It had one more job to do. Harper was away, speaking at some event. Julian went with her tripod and camera in tow. They wouldn't be back until Monday. I had time. Maya was still at the table, sorting papers. When I pulled out my old recipe box, she looked up. I didn't have to say anything. That night, I made an announcement. A live stream, nothing flashy. Just a photo of my mother's skillet and a folded card. No hashtags, no filters, no Harper, just a time. Tuesday evening, one camera, one stove, one story. By Monday morning, the post had taken off. More shares than anything I'd ever posted in my life. Mara tracked the numbers. The views were climbing. The comments poured in. Old students, former coworkers, strangers who somehow remembered my face. Some said they missed my cornbread. Others just said they missed me. Tuesday arrived without noise. I wore my oldest apron, the one with frayed corners, and a name tag so faded it blurred to a whisper. Maya set up the lights, checked the mic, ran the stream test. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. Harper and Julian came home that afternoon. Neither of them mentioned the setup. Julian asked if the counters were clean. Harper glanced at the camera, scribbled something on her phone. Said she'd be ready by 7. At 6 o'clock, I handed Maya a sealed envelope. Take this to the attorney first thing tomorrow, I said. She nodded. Then I reached into my pocket, pulled out another list, not of recipes, but of names. Friends, colleagues, witnesses, each one contacted, each one ready, not loud, not public, but steady, solid. At 6:30, Harper came downstairs, makeup done, sweater perfectly pressed, eyes sharp with rehearsal. Julian sat next to Maya, offered her a smile that felt colder than glass. She didn't give one back. 7 o'clock, I stepped into frame. No Harper, no Julian, just Mia and the skillet. I started with cornbread, talked about timing, about honey warmed over low flame, about how recipes are passed down but meaning is something you have to earn. 10 minutes in, Harper joined the shot. She smiled at the camera, called it a surprise appearance. I nodded, let her talk. Then I looked directly into the lens and said, "There's one ingredient no one ever mentions. The one that makes or breaks a recipe. It's not salt, not time. It's truth." I reached behind me, brought the envelope forward, placed it on the counter beside the hot skillet, then turned off the burner. The air in the kitchen froze. Behind the camera, Maya hit save, then upload. That moment something changed. Not in the room, not in the numbers, in me. That recipe, it wasn't for them anymore. It was mine, and for the first time in a long time, I'd cooked something that couldn't be taken. The live stream had no countdown, no fancy music, just me, standing there in the warm kitchen light, hands resting on the cutting board, the skillet already hot beside me. The smell of honey and time hovered in the air, faint but present, if you were really paying attention. It wasn't a performance. It was a return. I spoke slowly about food, about memory. How every dish we love is tied to a person. How this recipe had history. How I used to make it for Harper after piano practice. How she once called it magic bread because she believed it could fix a bad day. I didn't force emotion. I let it rise on its own, like steam off the stove. Midway through, Julian appeared behind the camera. He didn't say anything. Just looked at Moya, pulled out his phone, probably checking analytics. A few minutes later, Harper came in, styled, ready. She stood just off screen, arms folded, waiting for a cue that never came. I didn't pause, didn't change my tone. Just kept folding ingredients, letting the rhythm of the recipe carry the moment. Maya leaned in once, whispered something. I didn't look up. Harper stepped into the frame, smiled, placed her hand on my shoulder like she was walking into a family reunion. Her voice brightened as she thanked everyone for watching, called the whole thing spontaneous and beautiful. I nodded. Didn't say a word. She picked up a wooden spoon, pretended to stir beside me. Julian adjusted the camera, looking for the perfect shot. Everything choreographed, except the ending, because they hadn't written that part. Once the batter was ready, I poured it into the skillet, pressed it smooth with the back of a spoon, slid it into the oven. Then I bent down and reached under the counter, pulled out a single manila folder, set it beside the stove, left my hands on it for just a moment longer than needed. I want to share one last ingredient, I said. Not for the cornbread, for the truth. I opened the folder slowly. Inside were transcripts, video clips, financial records, a notarized affidavit from my attorney verifying everything. I didn't raise my voice, didn't accuse anyone. I read a single line. This is what it sounds like when a family chooses silence over integrity. Then I closed the folder, slid it toward the edge of the counter. and looked directly into the camera. I didn't add anything more. I didn't need to. Harper stood still, hands still curled around the spoon. Julian lowered his camera, mouth slightly open. No one moved. Maya ended the stream with one quiet tap. "Uploading now," she said. I turned and walked to the oven. The timer hadn't run yet, but the scent told me it was ready. I pulled out the cornbread golden full, exactly right, set it on the counter. And at that moment, it didn't matter who stayed in that kitchen. The message had already left the room. The next morning, I woke before dawn. The house was still. Not peaceful, just still. That kind of stillness that settles in places people have stopped speaking. It lived under doors, inside chair cushions no one sat in anymore. I turned on the kettle and waited for it to boil. Didn't rush it. Maya was already up. Laptop glowing, screen full of notifications. Messages kept coming, hundreds, then thousands. Most from strangers. Some from names I hadn't seen in years. Former co-workers, students. Women who had cared for their mothers. Mothers who had been forgotten. The words were soft and sharp. "We saw you. We believe you. You reminded me of my own mother." I didn't reply. I just read them, one by one, letting them settle like flour sifted into a bowl. Harper and Julian didn't come downstairs until after 9. Harper moved quickly, phone in hand, thumbs flying across the screen. Her face stayed composed, but her jaw was tight. She poured herself coffee and sat in the far corner of the kitchen, facing away from me. Julian paced back and forth, mumbling about contracts, public image, legal angles. His words overlapped, falling flat. By noon, the unraveling had begun. The brand partnerships announced internal reviews. Harper's profile quietly disappeared from her wellness platform's homepage. 3 media outlets reached out for comment. Maya printed the first article and handed it to me. The headline was neutral, but the subtext wasn't. Questions emerge around authenticity in influencer mother-daughter brand. I didn't open it. I left it on the table, unfolded. By late afternoon, Julian was gone. He packed his things fast, didn't say goodbye. Harper didn't go after him. She spent most of the day upstairs. I heard her on the phone once, voice low, clipped, like she was reporting in rather than reaching out. She didn't speak to me. That night, I made dinner just for Maya and me. A quiet meal, no cameras, no plating tricks, just food, served like it used to be. We ate in the breakfast nook, the way we did back when she stayed over in high school. Maya lit a small candle, nothing fancy, one of those cheap cinnamon-scented ones, and set it on the table without saying a word. As I stood to wash the dishes, I saw Harper in the hallway. She looked smaller, somehow less polished. She didn't come into the room, just stood there at the archway, watching, her mouth open slightly, then closed. She gave a single nod, not an apology, not surrender, just acknowledgement. Then she turned and walked away. I didn't follow. Later that night, I sat by the back window, listening to the cicadas. The air was heavy, summer pressing in against the glass. And I thought about how silence can be used both as a weapon and as a refuge. Not everything has to be said to be understood. Some truths just settle in, like dust, quiet, unavoidable. That night, I didn't lock the kitchen drawer. Not out of trust, but because I no longer needed to. The drawer was mine again. Whether it held knives or recipes didn't matter. It held space, My space ... and no one was taking it this time. By the end of the week, Harper's brand deals were either suspended or quietly dissolved. The studio she had rented for product shoots stood dark, lights off, blinds drawn. Her production calendar disappeared from her phone. Julian never came back. Then a letter arrived from the licensing board. A formal investigation had been opened. Allegations of financial misrepresentation, exploitation of a dependent adult. The language was clinical, but its meaning was clear. It pierced through the quiet of the house. Maya handed me the envelope with no ceremony. I placed it on the coffee table beside a bowl of lemons. They had started to soften. Harper didn't cry, didn't argue, didn't ask me to explain. She moved through the house like someone waiting on a train she knew wasn't coming. The certainty in her step was gone, but not completely. There was still calculation in the way she took calls, always by the window, always in a measured tone. I let her stay, not because I felt sorry, not because I wanted to fix anything, but because some things are meant to be seen all the way through. Maya got a call back from Detective Avery. They had reviewed the footage. The affidavit was accepted. Formal statements would be taken, but it wasn't about pressing charges for me. I wasn't after punishment. I wanted clarity. I needed someone somewhere to say out loud that what had happened. That Sunday, I walked into the old studio and took it back. The front door still creaked, just like it always had. The shelves were lined with cookbooks. Some mine, some borrowed and never returned. The chalkboard Harper used for branding slogans still held her handwriting. I didn't erase it. I flipped it over and wrote something new. Legacy does not require performance. Then I opened the windows, let the air in, walked to the filing shelf, and pulled out a folder. Inside were the original incorporation papers for the cooking studio, signed by me ... years ago, before the camera crews, before the hashtags, before Harper. Monday morning, I took those papers to the courthouse. Maya came with me. The clerk was polite, efficient. She updated the record. My name was restored. No ceremony, no ribbon, just a quiet correction in a dusty ledger. That night, I stood in my kitchen again, alone. The skillet sat on the stove, newly seasoned and gleaming with care. It hissed gently as I poured in the batter, cornbread, golden and familiar. There was no camera watching, no microphone recording. Just me, and the quiet sound of something coming back together. Harper's room stayed dark. She didn't come down for dinner. Maya did. We sat at the little table by the window. I didn't ask where Harper was. I didn't need to. Some endings come with a crash. Others slip in like a curtain falling. And when it's over, what's left isn't vengeance. It's space. It's peace. It's something earned not by force, but by standing still long enough to be seen and not erased. 2 weeks later, I reopened the studio. No flyer ... no formal invite, just an open door, and the smell of bread in the oven. The tables had been rearranged ... The chalkboard wall now held a new message, scrawled in simple white chalk. Asterisk, asterisk, you are still welcome here. Asterisk, asterisk. No logos, no taglines, no branded language, just truth served quietly. I gave the space a new name. Not a brand, not a show, just a place. We called it asterisk, asterisk, the kitchen without conditions, asterisk, asterisk. A room where women my age could gather. Not to perform, but to cook, to speak, to breathe. Some arrived with aprons still folded from drawers they hadn't opened in years. Some brought only silence. That was welcome, too. Maya helped me organize the sessions. She reached out to a few nearby community centers. No social media, no press releases. Word spread like it used to. One woman at a time, slow, real. We made humble food. Cornbread, simple broth, potato salad passed down through 3 generations. We shared recipes written on the backs of envelopes and grocery receipts. There were no cameras, no planned smiles. No one asked for before and after photos. No one measured their worth in followers. One afternoon, a woman named Lauren brought a tin of butter cookies. She said her daughter hadn't spoken to her in for years. Still, she baked those cookies every Sunday just in case. I didn't ask for the story. I simply handed her a plate. We stood side by side, folding dough. In the quiet between instructions, I thought about all the years I had spent trying to be useful, trying to be needed, holding on to roles long after they turned into costumes. That weight gone now, the studio filled with a different kind of noise. The scrape of spoons, the clink of measuring cups, the low hum of stories being shared not for a feed, not for a brand, but for each other. Harper never returned to the studio after the papers were reinstated. She never stepped foot inside again, and that was all right. She had built something fragile, something curated. And when it cracked, there was nothing holding it up, but in this kitchen, there was weight. There was flour, salt, memory, enough to make something that lasted. Maya never filmed any of it, but she kept a notebook. Plain cover, soft spine, the pages bent slightly from the way her handwriting leaned. She said maybe one day it would be a book. I told her it already was even if no one read it. Some stories don't need to be published. Some live in the air, in the hands of those who remember, and that's enough. The first rain of the season came quietly, no thunder. Just a steady hush of water against the windows. I stood at the sink, towel in hand, drying the last plate from that morning's class. The smell of cinnamon and brown butter lingered. Maya had left early. She had an interview with a local publication, one she pitched herself. They wanted to talk about the kitchen without conditions. She asked if I wanted to come. I told her she already knew what needed to be said. The house felt full again, not with people, not with noise, with presence. There was nothing staged, nothing hidden, only what was real and stayed. I reached into the drawer beside the stove and found a folded note wedged between old measuring charts. Harper's handwriting, blocky from when she was 8. Asterisk, asterisk, thank you for making things feel safe. Asterisk, asterisk. I placed the note on the windowsill and left it open. That afternoon, I baked a small batch of cornbread, not for the class, not for the stream, not for the brand, just because the kitchen always smelled better when something warm was rising. As I pulled the pan from the oven, I heard footsteps on the porch, not rushed, not hesitant, just steady. I didn't turn around. I sliced the bread, set to pieces on a plate, one at the table, one near me. Then I sat. I didn't speak. I didn't have to. Some stories don't end with a door closing. Mine didn't. Mine stayed slightly open. Just wide enough for the scent to drift toward whoever needed it. Just wide enough for me to feel whole again without needing to be seen. If you've ever been a mother, a daughter, or someone who stayed silent out of love, this story was for you. Thank you for listening all the way through. If there's something in your kitchen or your heart that's been forgotten, know this: you can begin again, quietly, without permission, just by being who you are. If you saw yourself in this story, you're not alone, and there is still so much in you that no one has taken.